my name is Ethan Harrington. I was born in the middle of nowhere, but now I live in one of the most expensive apartments in Knightsbridge, London. Yes, the London you imagine. Full of history, culture, and money. My home is on the 5th floor of one of those mansions turned into residential complexes for the ultra-rich. When I look out my window, I can see Hyde Park in the distance and the glittering storefronts of Harrods almost within reach. But what you don't see is the true cost of this luxury. I remember the first day I set foot in the city. I was just a simple guy from rural America with nothing but a dream, the dream of becoming someone. I worked hard, earned a scholarship to Oxford, graduated with honors, and was quickly thrust into the financial market. But you don't just rise out of the shadows with hard work alone. It takes more, and that's when fate, or perhaps something else, intervened. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was at a cocktail party in a penthouse at the Shard. Everyone was there, millionaires and billionaires you'll never see on TV, men and women with enough power to control the fate of nations. But I was just another pawn, invisible to all. Until I met him. A middle-aged man, elegantly dressed in an Italian suit, nothing particularly special about him, except his eyes. They had this glow, a glow I couldn't quite place. "You want more, don't you?" he said, as if reading my soul. And of course, I wanted more. I wanted everything. That's when he made me an offer. He knew success comes with a price I might not be willing to pay. But who cares about mornings when there's money in front of you, right? And then, like magic, my life changed. Contracts started pouring in, opportunities appearing out of nowhere. Within months, I was living at Claridge's, driving an Aston Martin, and dining at the most expensive restaurants in Mayfair. The people who once ignored me now fought for my attention. I was on top of the world. No, I was the world. But there's always something, isn't there? Something that makes you question if you made the right choice. For me, it was during a gala at one of London's most expensive hotels, the Dorchester. I was at the center of the room, surrounded by people I had once envied. Champagne flowed like water. The music was soft, and the conversation, well, superficial, as always. Then I felt something. A pressure in my chest, as if the air was slowly being sucked out of the room. I looked around and noticed all eyes were fixed on me, but not with admiration. It was something else, darker. "Are you all right?" a woman asked. "Yes, of course," I replied, trying to keep my composure. But something was wrong. When I looked in the mirror, I felt a sudden wave of unease. I was different, paler, as if something was slowly draining my energy, my life. That's when I realized. The luxury, the money, it was all draining me. Every day, every new contract, every new expensive item I bought, it felt like a part of me was disappearing. Not physically, but spiritually. It was as if I was being consumed by the very success I had craved so desperately. I thought about seeking help, but who would believe me? I was the success story, the icon of wealth. Complaining about it, ridiculous, but not to me. I knew something was wrong. Until one night, while dining alone at the Ritz, the man from the Shard appeared again. He sat across from me without invitation, smiling that unsettling smile. "It's time, Ethan," he said calmly. "Time for what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You've been paying all along, but the final balance is due," he replied, leaning across the table. I told him to leave, but his words echoed in my mind. Every day that passed, I felt more drained, more empty. Now weeks have passed since that night at the Ritz, and every minute feels like a countdown to something I can't escape. My health is deteriorating. The doctors say it's stress, maybe exhaustion. But I know the truth. It's the price. The price for all of this. My skin is turning strangely gray, my eyes. God, my eyes are changing. There's something inside them, something that was never there before. Something dark. Last night, at a party at the Savoy, I felt it again. Everyone in the room staring at me, but this time it wasn't paranoia. I saw it in their faces. They knew. They knew my time was running out. When I left the room, the man from the Shard was waiting for me at the corner. "It's almost time, Ethan," he whispered. "You can keep running, but the price must be paid." I went home, locked myself in my room, but today, when I woke up, The luxury wasn't comforting anymore. It was suffocating. Every expensive object around me seemed to pulse, vibrating with an energy I didn't want to feel. My apartment, once my sanctuary, now feels like a golden prison, ready to devour me. I'm alone, waiting for what's coming. Every knock on the door makes me jump. Every phone call brings me closer to the end. I know I can't run. The pact was sealed, and the price will be paid. There's no escaping the luxury that, in the end, will consume every last piece of my soul. So here I am, in the most expensive apartment in London, surrounded by gold and marble, waiting for that entity to come for me. And now, I hear footsteps.
I've always been fascinated by luxury, not the cheap kind which anyone with a comfortable bank account can buy. I mean the kind of luxury that transcends the ordinary, that elevates your soul and makes you feel above everyone else. Milan was my stage. I was born and raised here amidst art and high fashion, between fashion shows and the most exclusive events. My name is Isabella, and until recently, my life was a modern fairy tale. My days were spent between Via Monte Napoleon and the Quadrilateral of fashion, shopping at the most famous boutiques, sipping cappuccinos at the cafes in Galleria Vittorio Emanuele V, and attending lavish dinners in the heart of Brera. I frequently stayed at the Armani Hotel when I needed a break from my own apartment on Corso Como. The parties and events never ceased, and of course I was always among the most anticipated guests. Everything began to change during Milan Fashion Week a few months ago. I was staying in the presidential suite at the Excelsior Hotel Gallia, a jewel in Piazza Duca d'Aosta. The hotel, with its stunning architecture and unmatched service, was a bubble of exclusivity. But that night, the bubble started to burst. After a spectacular party at Palazzo Cerboloni, surrounded by movie stars and fashion moguls, I returned to the hotel. I entered the suite, took off my Louboutin heels, and looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. It seemed off. For a moment, I thought I saw something different in my eyes. They were empty, almost like they were made of glass. I blinked, and the vision vanished. That was just the beginning. The following days were a blur of runway shows, dinners, and events, but in every mirror I looked into, and in Milan, mirrors are unavoidable, something unsettled me. It was subtle at first, a movement at the edge of my vision, a blur that disappeared as soon as I focused on it. By the weekend, the unease had transformed into something much darker. I was getting ready for a private party at an old mansion in Navigli, one of Milan's most charming areas. The villa was famous for its refined design, its elegant pool, and the mirrors that adorned every room. I was in the bathroom, washing my hands, when I felt a chill down my spine. I turned slowly, facing the mirror. The reflection was there, as it should be, but something in its eyes. The eyes were no longer mine. There was a darkness within them, a deep, dense darkness, like an endless void. I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, the reflection was smiling. A cold, distant smile that did not match my terrified face. That's when I heard a whisper, low, almost imperceptible, but I could distinguish the words, "You don't belong to this world." I ran out of the bathroom, my heart racing, and returned to the party, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer the same, and the reflection no longer followed me. It seemed to be waiting. I hoped that time would erase the horror of that night, but the following days only brought more terror. Every mirror, every reflective surface I looked into showed something wrong, something dark. And it wasn't just mirrors. Glass, shop windows, even the lenses of glasses seemed to have something lurking, something watching me, something that knew something I didn't. A week later, I was at a cafe in Galleria Vittorio Emanuele. I was trying to act as if nothing had happened. The barista handed me my cappuccino, but when I lifted the cup to drink, I saw my reflection in the surface of the liquid. It smiled again. I threw the cup on the ground, drawing curious glances, but no one else seemed to notice what I was seeing. Since then, I've been avoiding mirrors as much as possible. But last night, everything changed. I woke up in the middle of the night with a sense of presence. My apartment was in absolute silence, except for the faint sound of breathing coming from my bathroom. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard the sound of something dragging on the floor. With my heart racing, I slowly approached the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and when I peered inside, I saw me, my reflection, but not in the mirror. She, or I can no longer say, was sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at me. She smiled that same cold smile and whispered, "Now it's your turn." I woke up in my bed this morning, with sunlight filtering through the curtains. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But when I got up, I instinctively went to the mirror, as I did every day. My reflection was there, but it didn't move. I smiled hesitantly, hoping it would do the same, but it just stared at me. It didn't blink. It didn't smile. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me, footsteps that couldn't be mine. Then the footsteps came again, louder this time, echoing from the hallway outside my bedroom. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that I was no longer alone. The reflection in the mirror began to change, its eyes darkening, and I realized with horror that it was not just watching me. It was waiting for what I could only fearfully imagine.
It all began a few months ago, but I only realized what was truly happening recently. Something changed, something subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Like a slight discomfort in the back of my neck. A sensation you can't immediately identify, but that intensifies over time until it can no longer be ignored. I was being watched. There was no doubt about it. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just fatigue, stress. God knows that life at the top of a major company takes its toll. But the more I tried to push the idea away, the more it grew. Like a tumor, the feeling took root in my mind, turning every shadow, every muffled sound, into a potential spy. I am a middle-aged man, and I've always been very successful. 25 years in the financial market, I built an empire. My luxurious penthouse in Manhattan is proof of that. Glass walls that open to a panoramic view of the city, modern designer furniture, artworks by renowned artists. Everything within my reach, all carefully earned. But with success come enemies. That has always been an inescapable fact, especially when you're at the top. Competitors are always lurking, waiting for the slightest weakness. Lately, it seems like there's more than just the usual market competition. I started working more from home because the office stifled me. All those people, colleagues, employees, seemed so suspicious. Every glance was furtive, every gesture calculated. And of course, with the pandemic, working from home became the norm, and I ended up isolating myself even more. I fired one employee here, dismissed another there, until only I remained in this vast penthouse. thought it would bring me peace, but the effect was the opposite. The more I distanced myself from others, the more paranoid I became. I started to notice things, small details that had previously escaped me, like the smell of cigarettes that suddenly filled my study, even though I quit the habit 10 years ago, or the constant feeling of being watched, even in my most intimate moments. There were nights when I was certain someone was lurking, watching me from outside the glass windows, but who could be there? I was on the 45th floor, for God's sake, and yet the feeling wouldn't leave me. Could one of my former employees be plotting something against me? Could they be in cahoots with a competitor? Or worse, with a family member? Ah, my family. Long history of disagreements and inheritance battles. My siblings have always coveted what I had, always felt inferior, slighted. And now, could it be them, watching me, trying to find a way to bring me down? No, this is madness, I whispered to myself. But deep down, I knew this idea had its roots in reality. No one gets to where I am without leaving a trail of resentment and enemies. Maybe it was one of those competitors. Perhaps someone was gathering information to incriminate me, or worse. The nights became unbearable. The silence, once a blessing after chaotic days, was now filled with imaginary whispers, ghostly creaks in the walls, as if the building's very structure were conspiring against me. I began to avoid mirrors, not because I feared my reflection, but because, whenever I approached, I had the strange sensation that something moved behind me, something I could never quite identify. A reflection, that wasn't mine. What tormented me most were the phone calls. The phone would ring late at night, and when I answered, all I could hear was slow, heavy breathing on the other end. No matter how many times I changed my number, the calls always returned, always that sound. Who are you? What do you want? I screamed, but only silence answered. In the end, I took the phone off the hook and left it that way. Better than facing that infernal mystery again and again. I began to think there might be hidden cameras around the house. I searched every room, checked every inch of the walls and furniture, looking for some sign, some clue that I was being watched. Checked the air ducts, inspected the darkest corners, but I found nothing. Nothing concrete, at least. Just that persistent feeling that something was wrong. I could feel my body deteriorating little by little. I was losing weight, my eyes were sunken, and my skin, God, it seemed like I aged years in just a few weeks. The dreams, those horrible dreams. I dreamed of shadows in my home, sneaking through the halls, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I woke up sweating, heart racing, but the sensation of being watched remained. I remember one particular night. It was raining heavily outside, thunder echoing through the enormous windows of the living room, and I was sitting in my black leather armchair, staring into the void. I was convinced someone was watching me from outside. A shadow, maybe a man, standing on the balcony. But how? How could someone be out there on the 45th floor? My mind told me it was impossible, but my heart was gripped with terror. I felt the need to check. I walked to the glass door carefully, trying not to make a sound. When I looked outside, I saw nothing, just the torrential rain pouring down the glass. Sighed in relief, but my body didn't relax. Deep down, I knew something was out there, lurking, even if I couldn't see it. But the worst came the next morning. I had barely slept, as usual, but when I woke up, found wet footprints on the floor, marked by boots. The same ones I saw in my dream. Footprints, in my living room near the balcony. Footprints of someone who could never, ever have been there. My body trembled, panic overtook me. Someone had been here. How? I had checked the penthouse top to bottom. There are no entrances that aren't locked, but the footprints, they were there, etched into the polished floor. Panic set in. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. I started to think this was the end, that maybe some enemy was finally ready to make their final move. I looked around, noticing the emptiness of the penthouse. Everything I had built, all the luxury, all the power, none of it mattered now. I was alone, haunted by ghosts of my own creation, ghosts from a life of betrayal, selfishness, rivalries. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadow at my back seemed to grow. Finally, I was on the verge of sleep when I heard a muffled sound coming from the hallway. Footsteps. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. I waited in silence, but the noise stopped. Everything was quiet again. Was I going crazy? Got up and walked to the bedroom door, opening it slowly. The hallway was dark and appeared empty, but then I heard it again. Footsteps, slowly approaching. A shiver ran down my spine. I quickly closed the door and locked it, my whole body trembling. Tried to convince myself that it was my imagination playing tricks on me. But I knew something was wrong. Something was there. Then, suddenly, the apartment lights went out. A total blackout. The only sound left was the ticking of a clock, the cuckoo clock, a family heirloom, which I had placed in the corner of the living room and rarely paid attention to. The sound echoed in the darkness as if it were a warning. My heart was beating so hard that I could swear someone, or something, was listening. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. I knew I was no longer alone. I groped in the dark, searching for something I could use as a weapon. I found an iron bar that was part of a piece of furniture. My instincts were screaming at me to run, to flee, but a morbid curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. Who was he? What was he doing here? Then I heard a noise, an almost imperceptible whisper coming from the next room, my bedroom. Trembling, I approached the half-open door. The faint light coming from the window dimly illuminated the room's interior. I could see a shadow moving inside, and fear paralyzed me. Then, a familiar voice whispered my name. How could this be? That voice. It was mine. With growing dread, I pushed the door open. Inside the bedroom, beside the bed, I saw the figure of a man with his back to me. His shoulders were tense, his posture rigid. He was standing, staring at the mirror. As I approached, he slowly turned, revealing a face that made me freeze. It was me, not a copy, not an illusion, but me, flesh and bone, smiling wickedly, with eyes that didn't seem human. Without warning, he lunged toward me, and everything went dark. When I awoke, I was lying in bed, drenched in cold sweat. The lights were on, the clock read 11:47 p.m., exactly as before. I stood up, dazed, and rushed to the balcony. Everything was silent, no figure, no sign that anyone had been there. But when I turned, something in the mirror caught my eye. There was a dark stain on the glass, something that hadn't been there before. And then, I noticed something that made me shudder. The reflection in the mirror wasn't synchronized with me. It was watching me, and at that moment, I understood that I would never be alone in that penthouse again.